Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Today on the show, I interviewed Julie Scolnik. She is a flutist and a recent author, published author, with a new book called Paris Blue. We talk about how she's combined both her loves of music and writing to change her life for the better. So welcome to the show, Julie. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here myself.
Now, you've been quite the busy creative. I mean, you're a musician, and you just recently released your first book, Paris Blue, a memoir. I definitely want to jump into that later, but tell me from the beginning your Paris story, your connection to Paris. I always like to start there.
Okay, sure. Just a quick background about myself, because the writing thing is just such a new role that I'm playing. But I'm a professional flutist and I live in Boston. I run my own chamber music series here. But 40 plus years ago, I was on a junior year abroad program with my American university, Wesleyan. And so I spent the year in Paris as a 20-year-old. And I took classes in humanities and French civilization and, psycho and philo, as they say in French. That was the inspiration of my memoir 40 plus years later. And it's been that many decades that I've been trying to bring this story and share it with the world. Wait, let me say that again. That I've been trying to share this story with the world. And last October, that day finally came, and it was published by Kohler Books. So I'm very, very thrilled about that.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it's such a big deal to publish a book and so much work and like getting a publisher and all that. But just going back to like being a musician for all these years and being a flutist, like how did that come about? Were you always playing music as a child, or when did you start?
Yes, exactly. It's really sweet that you're asking that because I just did a written interview that was called Meet the Artists, and a very well-known woman who interviews conductors and composers and very busy and famous musicians. So I was quite honored to be sent this written interview, which just went live on her website. She calls herself the cross-eyed pianist, and her name is Fran Wilson. But I bring it up just because she wanted to know where the music began also. So it's fresh in my mind. Yeah. And the answer that I gave, of course, is that when I was a little girl, even though both my parents were not musicians, my father was a lawyer, then became a judge, and my mother was an English teacher, there was always music filling our house. And my mother found the most beautiful records for her three daughters, and these records just bonded us as sisters and seeped into our DNA. And I believe they really were responsible for the direction that our careers took. So when I was 10 years old and I had to choose an instrument, I chose the flute, and I spent 3 idyllic summers at a music camp, and I knew right away that music would be my life. So yes, I went to a conservatory. I was a freelancer for many years in Boston, meaning that I played with every imaginable ensemble, the ballet and the opera. Wow. And I subbed with the Boston Symphony. And then 20 years ago, I started my own organization called Mistral Music. And what that means is that I have, for 25 years, actually, why did I say 20? This is our 25th season that we just completed. I have put concerts together by choosing the programs, choosing the musicians, connecting with my audiences, writing. This actually leads right into your creative discussion, because has become a kind of a magnificent obsession of mine, in which I not only choose the music and hire the players, but I have my finger in every pot, meaning I produce the program booklets, I write the message from the director, I create the posters and the banners that you see all over town. I am just very, very involved in any of the artistic elements. Um, so it's really interesting that you in asking me before we started recording the direction that this would take, and in what way is your life, do you consider yourself a creative? I just almost laughed out loud, because that is the only thing I consider myself. All the other stuff that needs to be done for the series, my husband takes care of, like most of the technical bookkeeping, fundraising, um, that kind of thing, board meetings, that kind of thing. But I almost go overboard the other way, because I micromanage every font we use, every type of chocolate we pass out for the Valentine's Day concerts. I don't know how to step back. If it's about a creative choice, I'm involved.
And that's so great that you have someone to help you, because I mean, that's the part for creatives where they suffer a lot, is they just want to create. They don't want to do the administration.
Exactly.
You're so lucky to have that partner to help you do all those things. And like you said, you can just be creative. And do you feel like having to take care of the administration or doing that kind of stuff would like hinder the creativity?
Oh gosh. Well, I do still do a fair amount of it, I have to admit. I still, I actually hate doing social media, but I do it because I know it's necessary for my book, which I know we haven't started talking about yet, but also for all the concerts. It really helps to connect with the people who come to our concerts, music lovers out there. So yes, it takes up a big chunk of my time when I'd rather be uh, doing something else.
Yeah, it's funny you say you hate social media, because a lot of artists I've talked to as well, they hate using social media. What is it about it?
Well, it's not so much that I hate it, because there is a certain amount of satisfaction, of course, when you make a post, maybe you for both things, because now what I've done is I have split my Instagram account, where I never used anything but Facebook. Facebook I could handle, and I enjoyed getting the likes like anyone else, and connecting with old friends from decades ago. I do appreciate how great it is to have that. But it's just when I knew that I had to then branch out to Twitter and Instagram that I started to get annoyed by it all. And, and I just find that now I have to keep up both the music Instagram plus the book Instagram. And I just find it kind of a noose around my neck, because I know I'm supposed to post a lot and get more followers. And I just get kind of exhausted thinking about it. And
Yeah.
but it's okay too. I mean, it's also kind of fun.
It's a lot of pressure. I was talking about this with another artist the other day, about how, artists, they just want to create. They just want to make their art. They don't want to have to constantly interact, constantly get likes, constantly get follows. It used to be,
Yes, exactly.
you walk into a gallery, you walk into a theater, you listen, you look, you didn't have to like constantly give. It can be a little draining.
Exactly. It's true. And, oh, I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say. Yes, exactly. Sometimes it can be fun. Sometimes I've discovered people, I've made new friends, I've found people from my past. Old students have found me because of social media. And, that's always incredibly gratifying. So also, I get incredibly beautiful emails from people about both the concerts and my new book. And you can't really replace that with anything. So I really have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, and I want to move a little bit more into, how did you go from being this amazing musician, this flutist, this director, to writing a book? Like, what made that come about?
Oh, well, that's the real foundation to everything that I'm doing now. What happened is, it's not as if I woke up a year ago and said, I think I'll write a book. This book, the story behind this book, has been lingering in the corridors of my psyche since 1978. Now, when I arrived in Paris, I was 20 years old, and it was 1976, and this big story happened. Um, and then 2 years later, it was over. When I say story, I mean a big romance. I'll just give you a little background. I don't want to talk too much because I know that time is limited. And once I start talking, it's very hard for me to shut up. So, but what happened is I landed in the most beautiful poetic city in the world. Lucky you live there all the time. And I was 20 and there was no internet and no cell phones. And you just have to remember that this is the pre-internet era. So all of us, my friends who were in the same school program, we were floating around feeling so inspired and moved and overwhelmed by the beauty of the city, but also very isolated from each other. And because we had no way to connect with each other, and very few of us even had telephones in our meager student quarters, by November, I started to feel very alone and a bit lost, and wondered if I should stay on my school year abroad program for only one semester instead of the full year.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed to fill the void somehow. So I looked desperately for a chorus to join. And I not only found one, but I found the best one in the world because it sang with the Orchestra of Paris, a highly, acclaimed orchestra in the world that was conducted by an esteemed legend, Daniel Barenboim. And so I immediately got the information, auditioned, and got accepted. And then I was over the moon because I belonged to something that I loved. My name was on an attendance sheet, and the metro now took me to someplace I was supposed to be instead of just crisscrossing patterns across Paris that, in random locations. I was just taking metros and buses all day long, every day, and loving it. But sometimes it was so easy to feel a bit aimless.
Yeah.
So on the third rehearsal or so, I noticed a strikingly handsome man sitting in the bass section of the chorus. And after that point, my life was never the same. And that was the structure of the beginning of the book. And this was a man who was a lawyer, and he was married and had a 3-year-old son, but he was separated, and he began to drive me home from rehearsals. And then I learned he really needed to learn English for his work in international law. So we started meeting in cafes and in all the parks of Paris. And this was over, the Oscar Wilde fairy tales or English romantic poets. And there was really no more highly charged romantic way to get to know someone. But he was very proper. He was not a typical cliched situation of the philandering Frenchman out to take advantage of a young American girl. Everything was actually very proper with us for about 3 months. And yet something was clearly undeniable between us. We both tried to avoid it because his situation was complicated and I was about to leave Paris in 4 months. And anyway, that is where the book begins.
Wow, you're already sucked in. I need to read.
Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The most beautiful thing about finally seeing this book in print is not that it took me so many decades, and I will explain that in 1 second. But that, as I mentioned, I do get emails daily from readers who tell me that they read it in one gulp or two or 3 days at the most. Some people say they started it and they read it straight through the night because they could not stop reading. And of course, that is the best thing a writer can hear.
Yes.
But then they just tell me also that it brought back their own stories. I've had grown heterosexual men write to me that they could not stop sobbing at the end because it brought back something for them. Well, you'll see that the book is not just about this one story or about love, first love, or the grip of first love, or about love at first sight, which is also a bit of what this book is about. But it's also about the role that memory plays in our lives. And in the end, I wanted readers to take away the fact that our memories are not to be canceled or deleted or repressed or pushed aside as many people think they should. Throw away the old stuff, move on with the new. But on the contrary, they are who they do make up who we are today.
Yeah.
And that they flow. One of the lines from my book is how these early Paris vignettes from when I was 20 and living on Rue Bonaparte, they flow like light through the prism of our current days. And they always will. And I do not wish it to be any other way.
That's
So,
really beautiful. I love that. It's so pretty. No, I mean, perception is reality, right? And like, we can't trust our brains, and memories change, and whatever they become, they become. But that is fascinating. I'm curious to see where the book will take us.
oh, well, thank you. Thank you. What happened, just to give you a little reason, explanation, just to give you pause, just, just to give you a little context and explanation of how this took me 4 decades to see in print.
Yeah.
What happened is that when this big love affair ended rather dramatically when I was 22, when this guy, this Frenchman, finally came to Boston to study at Berlitz because he really needed to learn English.
Yeah.
The relationship ends very suddenly without explanation. And I probably will just leave it there because I want readers to not know too much and I don't want to do any spoilers. But what happened is then I moved to Boston to start my career as a flutist, and I couldn't do anything. All I did was cry. Every time I took my flute out, tears would leak from my eyes and my throat would tighten up and I couldn't play and I couldn't listen to any of the music that was deeply rooted in our history. So I knew there was something I had to do. And what I did was I took 3 spiral notebooks and my favorite fountain pen, and I went and sat by the Charles River and wrote and wrote and wrote for about a month. And when one notebook was filled up, I started the next. Because when people read this book now, they are all saying to me, how did you remember all that stuff from 1976, 77? And I didn't remember that now. I could never have written it now. I wrote the first part of the book way back then.
Wow.
That is how I remembered entire verbatim conversations with this guy, Luc, and what I was wearing every day and what I ate and where I went and every conversation we had. Even that is a bit shocking because I was not keeping a journal at the time. I remembered this stuff 18 months later after it was over when I was trying to recover from the ending, from the heartbreak. So I wrote it all down. And when the notebooks were filled up and I had written the story up till that point, meaning 1978, the 18 months before that, I threw it up in a closet with all of his photos and I didn't take it out for another 10 years.
Wow.
Then 10 years later, I learned how to use a computer. I entered into a computer. I even had a very different title for it. I found a Shakespeare sonnet, number 94. And the title of the book at that point was Lilies That Fester.
Ooh.
And the sonnet begins something like, they that have power to hurt, but do not do the thing they most do show, who moving others are themselves as stone. And I went, oh my God, yes, this is my book. This is my book. And I was going to put the sonnet at the inside the title page. But then I realized one day, I think it must have been another 10 or 15 years later, I had a kind of light bulb aha moment in which I realized what the point of my book was. Because as you know, it's not good enough to have a good story. You have to also make a point. You have to have a good point to make. And I started reading books about memoirs. And I learned that memoirs are about one thing. They are not about everything but the kitchen sink in your life. They are not autobiographies. They are about a universal truth as illustrated by a personal story. And I read this book by Marion Rote Smith, and it was all about that and finding your truth. And it was all about boiling down your story so there was nothing tangential or extraneous in that one story. So I took my material and I cut 100 pages and I restructured it and I boiled. That's the term they like to use for getting rid of anything that does not have to do with this one story. And it's hard to do because I was now in the throes of writing down my life. What I
Yeah.
didn't explain is I think a couple more decades by now have passed, and I had written too much material. I had everything in there about my two children, about every boyfriend in my 20s post this Frenchman's
Yeah.
relationship. And then I realized, I had tried to send it out, but I sent it out before it was ready. And when I got rejections, then I got discouraged again. That's when I realized what I had to do to make it a good book. And that's when I cut 100 pages, changed it all, restructured. And that's when I came up with a different title, which my middle title was A Certain Shade of Blue. And that was way before the 50 Shades of Grey thing happened. And when that happened, I realized I couldn't use that title anymore.
Oh, no.
So I got discouraged for another 5 or 10 years. And here we are now, about, maybe 5 years ago, when I was determined if it was the last thing on earth that I did, I was going to see this book in print. So that's when I came up with Paris Blue. And I knew that that was my title. And I also knew that I had found my truth. I had found the point to my book, and it all came together. And then I was starting to feel pretty happy about it. That's when I buckled down and found an agent, found an editor who really got my book and understood the emotional content, really kind of related to the emotional side. And that's when I knew that I was going to be able to push this over the finish line once and for all. And that's basically what happened.
Oh my gosh, basically, that's a lot more than basic. I mean, this is decades in the making. I love it. I love that you
You're so sweet. And that's really why it was so huge for me to finally see it happen. So many people say, well, why now? Why did you wait 40 years? I didn't. I just didn't succeed until a few years ago.
Yeah. It took a long time. And especially a memoir, it's really putting yourself out there. It's really exposing. You're naked in front of everybody. And how were you scared to release that?
Also, you're such a good interviewer. Yes, exactly. Well, in the middle of those 4 decades that I'm telling you about 20 years ago, when I did start sending it out and it was not ready, it was read by somebody who loved all things French. And when she got it, she said, I love this, but I think I could sell it. That's what, agents are always saying. I don't know if I can sell this. And that's really the terminology they use.
Yeah.
She said, I think I can sell it if you turn it into a novel. So I did. And that's not a small thing.
Yeah.
So I changed the whole thing into fiction. I fictionalized not just the names, but I changed things. I killed this guy off at the end. He is still very much alive. But in the novel version, he dies of an aneurysm, and I go to his funeral at the end, and I had to bear witness. So there are certain parts that I really loved as fiction, but in the end, I realized that the most true and honest and authentic version for me to tell this story would be as a memoir. So I turned it back. Oh, when I sent it to this woman who asked me to do it, she didn't like it anymore. So that was a big waste of maybe another 5 years or so. But then I went back to memoir and used my own name, used my own husband's name, changed the names of everybody else, meaning the Frenchman.
Yeah.
Meaning a little side story about a flute teacher who
you can't give it all away. You can't give it all away.
I won't give anything about that away. But so I changed anyone who might sue me, and so I'm pretty much protected. And I did not change anything else. I kept it very, very true to the story. And yes, it was difficult to expose myself. And one of the reasons I made it into a novel as you started to ask me, was because I wanted to protect myself and
Yeah.
I wanted to protect my family and my husband and my children and everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I realized that I couldn't do that. And then I just decided, all right, my life is now an open book, as they say.
It's
So,
quite literally.
and, I have not regretted that part of it. I've only been very touched by it because the responses I'm getting from people are so beautiful and they're so kind. And people just have been thanking me for sharing this very deeply personal story. Because by sharing something so personal, I think that is the reason people relate to it. And, I loved some of the blurbs I got from writers and from the acquisitions editor of the publisher who ultimately accepted my book. One of his comments was, we all have to face these kinds of experiences from first love, including the battles, the scars, the loss, the feeling of loss, and trying to move on, and the relapses, and then moving on and realizing that your life has to find its own forms. His quote was so much better than that. I wish I had it right next to me to read out loud to you, but it was true that because I showed quite a bit of vulnerability and relapses and ambiguities, ambivalence about moving on and not being able to move on. I mean, a lot of the people who have written reviews about this from various, and not like Amazon reviews, because those have been absolutely amazing, but sometimes, oh, I don't know, there were places called Book Life or Kirkus and this and that. Some of these young reviewers are saying, oh, I almost tore my hair out when she gave him another chance or when she went running back to him or this and that. But that's what people can relate to. We've all been there,
We all do that. Yeah. And that's what makes a book good too, is when it's relatable, when we can put ourselves in the shoes and, want to
Exactly.
feel things.
Exactly.
That's what
And yeah, so sorry. Yes, exactly. I hate that I talked over you just now, but I was going to say also that it covers, oh yeah, the last point I just want to make before I forget is that the book, of course, begins with the 20-year-old narrator, but it traces me on a 30 or 35-year pathway to an adult life, to middle age, where I met the ultimate true love of my life, my current and only husband, and had children. And the reader can see how I found a happy life and
Yeah.
how I struggled to put that other part in the past and successfully. But the book also very much has to do with the role of memory in our lives. Like I said at the beginning, that that we never really let go of these memories, and we shouldn't.
Yeah.
And therefore, people feel embarrassed. Oh, well, yes, I kept some of this stuff and I still remember this when I go to Paris. That is human nature. That is who we all are.
Yeah. Something
So,
interesting about that. People hold on to things and that shapes and forms us, like you said, the importance of memory.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, I'm very excited to read it. It's called Paris Blue, guys, and we'll definitely put that in the show notes. But I mean, as someone who is the ultimate creative, working between music and writing and directing and doing all these really creative, fun things, like what advice would you give to other people who are maybe searching for their creative gifts and they don't feel like they have any?
Oh, that was such a beautiful question. Well, I believe that. Oh, that is a hard question, though, because my first instinct is to say I think we all are creatives. But to be quite honest, I think that some people have a certain something in their DNA which moves them to create more than other people do. One thing I wrote recently was when somebody said, "What's the connection between writing and playing music?" And something just hit me, which was number one. Um, Maya Angelou said something which resonated really deeply with me. And she said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you.
Hmm.
And when I read that, I went, oh my God, yes, that's why I've tried for 40 years. I had to tell this story. And, at one point, Crystal, I did go through cancer about 15, 17 years or so ago. And when that was happening and I didn't know what was going to happen to me, I said to all my friends, look, if I don't make it, would you please just publish my book? That's how much I wanted to tell this story. And then recently I kind of realized that the desire to play a piece of music or to share music with the world in a certain way may come from the same slightly urgent place that writing a story comes from. So those are my two sides where I realize they kind of intersect.
Yeah.
But I think that some people don't feel that same need. You know, there are people like my husband who would say that he's the reason I'm able to be so creative because he's the absolute opposite of me in terms of, you know, I'm a crazy loose cannon free spirit and he is rational and helps me through all the stuff I'm so bad at. And I have people say, Julie, thank God for your husband. I mean, and they say it kind of a nasty way too. I don't take it as a compliment when they say it like that, but it's absolutely true. On the other hand, I feel that if people have a story to tell, I think they should tell it. And they should write it. I think they should play an instrument if that's what they're dying to do, or draw or paint a painting. I feel that, you know, we all need to express ourselves in those ways. And if you're afraid that writing a book is so daunting, take it from me, you absolutely can do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Advice, because so many of my listeners have reached out and said, "Oh, I want to write this book, or I want to tell a story." And for some reason, we just put being an author like up on this pedestal where it's like they're the greats, they're the masters. I could never be on that level, and why should I even try? How embarrassing to even call myself a writer! Like it's really been put up there. It's interesting.
Totally agree with you. I've seen a lot of writers who hold writers' retreats talk about this because they are trying to encourage people to tell their stories. Now, I don't do that because I wouldn't have the faintest idea how to teach that kind of class. And I never actually went to one of those either. But I imagine that those would be extremely helpful. That if you're scared, you just go, you write, and then you share your writing with others and you workshop it, as they say. And maybe if you need work, then you get a very smart developmental editor or something like that. I didn't have that, but I did have just an astute pair of eyes, ears, and heart read through my work and tell me which parts were confusing, because here I was trying to cover so much material and so many decades that I did need help figuring out which parts I could leave out, how to jump in time, or how to do the flashbacks. I mean, I basically did figure those things out on my own, and then she just helped me polish it up. But I think that if anyone has a story, they can just start with that, and they can always get help making it cleaner later on.
Yeah, everyone has an editor, guys. Whether it's your friend or a paid professional, we all need editing in our life.
Absolutely right. And now I didn't realize what the world out there is like for writers, because now I'm on almost every Facebook forum or page, and in a kind of an overwhelming way. I try not to read too much of them, but there are so many people out there offering their advice, offering their expertise on how to help writers.
Yeah, you got to be careful with all that.
Yes, exactly.
And on that note, where can people connect with you online and buy your book?
Thank you for asking. Well, I do have an author site, which I just created ever since publishing this book. That is the easiest way. And it's just my name, which is juliescolnik.com. And on that site, I also compile all my spoken interviews like this one, which I'll put up there, and all my written interviews. Plus, there's a book trailer and all the ways you can buy the book. Of course, Amazon, the big evil empire. That is the easiest way and helps me, because the more people who buy it from Amazon, the more it'll show up on searches. But all the independent bookstores can get it for you, Barnes and Nobles. All the links are right on my author site. There's also a lot of, I didn't mention this, and if you have just 30 seconds more, I wanted to mention that on this author site of mine, I have links to all the YouTube performances of the pieces that I talk about in the book, because music plays such a fundamental role in this book that I wanted my listeners to be able to hear the pieces, because words have never been sufficient in describing the experience of listening to music. So in my book, we'll see a little footnote about a piece of music that I'm listening to with Luke. Music is what brought us together to begin with, and it's what tied us to most profoundly. So when you get, excuse me, so when you get to a moment like that in my book, you just go to the internet and to my author page, and you click on that piece of music, and you can hear what it sounds like. So there's lots of that. And if you're a music lover, I also have a site for the music series that I run, and that is called mistralmusic.org. Mistral is a kind of a wink, a tilt of the head, a nod to the Mistral wind in France, because both my husband and I are big Francophiles, and I play a wind instrument, and he's in wind energy. So Mistral is the name we gave our music series. And so mistralmusic.org, you will see that we have all our videos are on our YouTube channel and lots of news about that. I also cross-pollinate too. I want my music lovers in the audience to know about my book, and I want my book readers to know about my music. So it's kind of a nice connection.
Oh, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I love the idea of like reading the story and then being able to listen to the music at the same time. It really creates like a different experience of reading. And I love how you come up with the idea to mix the two like that, because
thank you.
It proves again that mediums can be mixed. And a lot of people are like, oh, I can't be a writer, photographer, podcaster. It's like, no, you can do lots of things. And this is a perfect example of that.
Exactly. I still feel, I hate to say it, everyone tells me to stop saying it, but I still feel like a fraud when somebody calls me an author, even though I've written a book that people really love and it's resonating across boundaries. But, I just, I'm like all the other readers who have told you, I can't be an author. And it's just hard for me to take that role in, and to believe it. But so I'm still having a bit of a hard time believing that people call me an author.
Well, you're definitely an author, and everyone go out and check out the book, Paris Blue. Check out her website. I will definitely put that in the show notes. So just check out the show notes to click on it and check it out. And thank you so much, Julie, for talking to me.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to meet you. And I hope I get to see you in Paris when I'm there.
I'll be at the concert. I can't wait.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.